My company is called On the Rocks. We design stationery made from tree-free materials. So this is the first product. It's a rock book made from stone paper. And this material is made mainly from stone waste that's mixed with a part recycled HDPE by heating it. So you don't need any water in the process of making the paper and don't need any trees, no toxins and no bleach. So it's a huge improvement compared to regular paper.
Right, that's quite an intriguing concept indeed. What we're going to do now, we're going to pause it right there and just hear what Daniel does.
Thanks. So I'm Daniel Schwaag. I'm with Made of Air, and we're dealing with waste CO2 in the atmosphere. So we're thinking of strategies of capturing that CO2 and converting it into useful products. So we're looking to sequester it first in use in building applications, and ultimately in putting it back under the ground.
Right, okay, so there we have it. We know what you do. We're going to go back to Anne now. So Anne, so basically you've just said that you make paper without trees, is that right?
Yes.
Right, how on earth do you do that?
Well, we are a stationery company, so we source the material, to be clear about that. But the stones that we use right now for the stone paper are actually a waste product from mines. So the really valuable minerals are, of course, extracted, but there's a lot of waste. And these rocks, they leave a lot of dust in the air, which is also a health risk for people working in the mines and living in the area. So if you use that rock and you ground it to dust, and the dust you mix with the HDPE by heating it, it becomes like a balloon-like mass. And you can pull it up really high, it's like a flat, and then it becomes thin, it becomes paper, in a nutshell.
Well, I'm intrigued. I've never heard that before at all. But clearly, and you have a book in your hand there, yes. And that's one of the products of what you do. Yes.
So we mainly make books for companies with a logo on it. We also have a consumer collection, but the main mission of the company is to make sure that we don't need any pulp paper anymore, especially in the stationery industry. So we'll be adding also other alternatives to paper to our collection in the near future.
Okay, is there anything special, special about the book you have in your hand? Anything better perhaps than the other? Like, I'm just thinking of other stationers, all the books on offer here in France, across Europe, across the world. What would make people maybe be more drawn towards what you have in your hand than maybe something else?
Okay, so this paper, it's writes really soft, a bit softer than the regular paper. Apart from that, it's of course more environmentally friendly compared to the regular stationery companies. But there's also something else, and if you are okay with it, I would like to ask the audience if someone knows another specific characteristic.
Go for it.
To the stone paper compared to regular paper.
Any stone paper experts in the audience?
Yeah, and there's a good thing about this, so you might want to answer, because the one who gets it right can come to our booth, which is next almost to the stage, and get a free book.
Seriously, can I just ask, does anybody know, does anybody consider themselves a stone paper expert? Put your hands up. There's a gentleman there looking very serious. Not that you look like a stone paper expert, I don't know what they look like, but...
Yeah, somebody shouted.
This gentleman here?
Okay. Yeah.
Water resistant, is that true?
Yeah, you can show it maybe,
okay,
you can try it.
We got some water?
Yes, I have it here.
Right, okay. So I just put water on this?
Yes.
And it won't go soggy?
No.
Right.
It's no problem. Yeah, just a problem
just
for the
all
stage
over you,
maybe.
All over your foot?
That we'll have to figure out later.
That is amazing.
Yes, it's still like a book, and you can still use the paper. You can just wipe it clean.
That's amazing. I mean, there's so many different things you could do. I mean, you could use it as an umbrella.
Yes.
Put it in the rain, in the park, suddenly a downpour. Pop it on your head. There's so many uses to that. So that person, who was it that shouted out that?
Everybody raised
Everybody says, yeah, I shouted out. Now you're all experts, aren't you? Okay, so whoever it was who shouted out can pop over to Anne's booth, Paper on the Rocks,
yeah.
and pick up one of those waterproof books there, indeed. Okay. Over to Daniel. Tell us a little bit more about the business model of what you're doing.
I was going to just latch on to what Anne said. Our
Sure.
process is actually quite similar. It involves grinding and compounding. I would probably talk about that a little bit before the business model is the way it works. How do we get the CO2 into this product? It is a plant-based approach. That means that the plants do the CO2 capturing. We think that's the best way to go because there's only 0.04% of CO2 in the air, so it's actually really hard to get a hold of the CO2. And what we do is we call it to extend the life of a tree. So what happens with the trees when they decompose after about 50 years is that the CO2 re-enters the atmosphere. And what we're trying to do is prevent that from happening by baking it under controlled conditions without oxygen and basically baking off everything out of that wood or that biomass that is not carbon. And then we have a resulting powder that is almost 90 or 93% pure carbon. And then we basically process that into industrial applications and products so we can use it in products and link the excess CO2 in the atmosphere to the material demands that we have. We're specifically looking at the building industry because that's where we really see the biggest waste of raw materials, and we see a real threat to our climate targets if we have to erect the housing for the next 2 billion people with the materials and methods that we use now.
Tell us a little bit, as I say, a little bit more about the business model and the way forward.
The business model is very simple, so we're basically selling a compound. I don't know if people are familiar with compounds. It seems to be a pretty materials-oriented audience. But just quickly, it's basically a mixture, just an Anne's product of a filler, a large amount of filler and a small amount of binder, which can then be heated and formed, can be extruded, pressed, injection molded. Our sort of iteration of the first sort of building application, it's a bit visionary too, because we think with the facade product we can also sell a kind of design value in terms of eco-communication. So this is made from this compound and pressed in presses.
Just tell us. So at the end of the cycle life of that product, there, what happens to it? Is it recycled again? Does it go through the
I think
processes?
in this context we would say there's a choice for the users at the end. So we're looking already at a probably 20 to 30 year use in a building application. And at that point, it's going to be a decision whether we want to recycle it. It's completely recyclable with a very similar chemistry as your product. Or if we want to decide that the climate targets that we've set ourselves will require that we actually put it underground. So we can restore this balance of subterraneous carbon and airborne carbon.
And how does your approach compare to the industrial carbon capture and shortage? What would you say?
It's simplicity. So there's a lot of approaches that are really interesting. They involve chemistry, sucking CO2 out of the air with forced mechanisms. But for us, it's really this decision that if you feel the air around you or you think about it, there's only 0.04% of CO2. So energetically, it's always going to be really hard to capture that. So we think photosynthesis that's the way to go. And that's why we have an incredible cost benefit to competitors in the carbon sequestration and use market, and we're immediately implementable, whereas the solutions in the other chemistry based on CO2 as a gas is a few years away to be commercially viable.
Right. Talking about competitors, so just thinking certainly about paper on the rocks here, other stationers, the big players, what's their take on what you're doing?
Well,
what do they think?
They're not doing that much, or not enough, in my opinion. So that's actually why I started the company almost 3 years ago, because I tried to look for a notebook made from stone paper, but it was actually I was not able to purchase one. So I had some talks in the industry, and apparently they're really hesitant to try on a new material, because the market was not really aware of what this material was like and how it would feel and how it will act when you are producing your stationery, of course, because it's a little bit of a different production process compared to a regular notebook. So it seemed that nobody was going to do anything about it. And that's when I decided to find a producer who could help me in making a final end product. And I think this is really interesting for the market in general for stone paper, because we make an end product that we present on the market that people can start using immediately, but also we hope to create awareness for these new types of materials because they are already out there. It's just mainly a matter of starting to use them on a larger scale, because scaling is really relevant to these alternatives for, actually in a lot of industries, this is a really essential element of trying to make that change. So that's why we make a product that you can hold and that you can start using immediately.
So stationers now, where they're not on board with you and you're not really interested to reach out with them again?
Oh, well, well, what actually is happening right now is that a lot of companies are approaching us that were previously, for example, with a famous Italian stationery brand, and they ask us to work with them and to produce their notebooks in the future. So I think it's a sign of the times that also companies are looking for more sustainable products, and I hope that eventually these companies will either wake up before it's too late for them, or everybody will just come to our company and we'll make sure that it's produced responsibly.
Right, so remember you heard it here first, Paper on the Rocks right here at ChangeNOW 2018. So just think about the future. Where do you see, let's say 5 years time, 10 years time, where do you see your products and what you're doing within the scene?
5 years time. In 5 years' time, we hope to sell about 250,000 square meters annually, and sort of license through licensing cover another 1.6 million square meters for about around about 250,000 tons of CO2 per year, and then hopefully spreading into other applications as well.
Anne, where do you see Paper on the Rocks 10 years time?
Well, it's very exciting because we are growing pretty quickly and we are expanding into other paper materials as well. But at the same time, we are looking at new impact models to see how a company can be of benefit to society apart from just making a sustainable product.
Okay, so although a lot of the panelists here, a lot of the sessions here, it's not about promotion, it's not about sharing their ideas in a commercial way. But if there was something here that you want the audience to do, the people listening to you here in the hall right now or online, when they look back at this on YouTube, what would you want them to feel? What would you want them to think?
Well, if you are interested in trying out the paper, you could come visit us today here. And you can have a look at our website or approach me directly. You can reach me at paperontherocks.com, and I'm happy to discuss things related to better paper alternatives and stone paper.
Great. Okay, Daniel.
I think we're here, or what we're really getting out of this these few days here is the talk about what we're doing and sort of trying to sharpen our message, because it's a very complex topic that we're talking about. So we're really open for discussions or comments about things that are not clear or that you would like to have explained in detail.